gonna start streaming right now. All right.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're live right now. Let's give it a few seconds.
Glad we got that good live footage of me trying to get
Okay,
the hair off my face. My dog good. This is a good way to start our podcast.
it's fine. All right, I'm just gonna start it right now. Welcome to the Classy Liberal podcast. I'm your host, Classy Liberal. Today's guest is Doctoral Defense, also known as CV. So, CV, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fine. So, CV, I'm a pretty big fan of you. I'm just gonna tell you outright. I mean, not only have or do I consider you really good at debating, I also like the content you make, and I don't know. I'm a pretty big fan of anyone that's in a STEM field. So, you know.
Well, happy that degree was good for something.
So the first time I found out about you was when you were on the Andy Warskin stream debating alternative hypothesis. I don't know if you've debated people before, like on YouTube before. Like, was that your first time?
That was my first time debating anyone on YouTube. I had been quite some time earlier, like I don't know, maybe a year earlier, even on one of the Right Stuff Network shows. But that was about it, and that was just kind of like a stream. I had no idea what was happening there. It was all very nerve wracking, but I would say the Worski appearance was definitely the first season one.
All right, and how did you think that debate went?
I mean, I thought it was okay. I wasn't really sure what to expect, and I did that very insecure thing that I have since learned maybe you shouldn't do, which is to keep the live chat up while the debate was going on. And I
Right.
kind of knew the audience would not be the most friendly audience. That part was expected. But wow, what a remarkably hostile audience. But I think all that said, by the end of it, I think the consensus seemed to be that I did okay. So I'll take that. I mean, when you have like truth and science on your side, that's like always a pretty good spot to be in.
All right. But I have to say, I think like the most memorable debate. I think the one that you know, I would say, I guess attracted a lot of people to you on Twitter and eventually to YouTube was your debate with JF. So, yeah, how was that?
And it was fun. It's funny because I mean, I guess it was a debate, but when JF contacted me, he was like, do you want to? I think he said something like, "My poor friend, alternative hypothesis." Really beat him down. So maybe you should come debate me now. And I was like, well, I really don't want to do a debate. This is in the middle of my summer job, which I actually just got done with for this year. Which were very, very long hours. And so, so I'm like, well, I don't really want to do a debate, but I'll come and have a conversation. Jeff was like, great, perfect. And then like the Twitter advertisements start coming out, and it's like blood sport debate, CV versus JF, and I was just like, God, like I don't even know who this person is. But that said, these are they have yet to present me with an argument or a paper that I kind of haven't read or haven't heard yet. And so it tends to not be anything too surprising with these folks.
Okay. And why you debate race realism out of all the topics out there?
Well, I mean, well, for one, I think it's the thing with just the flimsiest evidence, and the other thing is it kind of undergirds all of the politics. If you cannot demonstrably show that there is a connection between, as they say, culture is downstream from race, if you can't demonstrate that any of the things that you point to as reasons why we need to divide races or why ethno-states are a good idea is actually being based in reality, right? If all of those things are kind of figments of your imagination, they're kind of mythos constructed by economic circumstance, whatever the case may be, then the once the base of your politics falls apart, it's kind of hard to stick with that line of thought. And so I think in terms of just like people who I wanted to understand that like on a gut level, ethnopolitics are not always very useful. They're certainly not useful for 2019 America and the West, and I think that's the most effective way to kind of get people to understand that.
Okay. But like, do you ever receive criticisms that by debating these type of people, especially in these topics, you're sort of entertaining race realism and you're sort of like introducing people to like these dangerous ideas?
So I have heard that idea said about debate. I've never heard that said to me. I think the reason that's really never said to me is because I keep a pretty low profile. It would be difficult to argue that someone who, at the time of debating Worski had maybe 300 Twitter followers, right? That like I was going to bring people over to his channel with its, 100,000 subscribers, right? Like very, very unlikely that that would be the case. And I don't know. I'm not very popular. I never really caught on as a personality. I think because I'm fairly dry and boring and that's sort of who I am, which I'm content with. And so no one said it to me. I do hear it. I think it's a bad argument, personally.
Okay. So like, what are like the most common like arguments you hear from the race realist side that you think are like,
So,
yeah,
I mean, the most common one is just like it's a scientific fact. And so if you don't believe in it, then you're just delusional, and anything you say can be discounted from that point forward because you don't deal in the realm of reality. Uh, you know, that's their go-to. And all of their arguments are just more sophisticated versions of that, right? It's more sophisticated versions of so you don't believe skin color is real. So, is it not true that some people's noses are adapted for cold weather? Like iterations of those arguments are all fundamentally like, but isn't it scientific?
okay. So like, let's see, what else is there though? What do you think of the idea, like, this is often their argument, that IQ and criminal activity are very much linked?
I mean, the standard to establish that would be a mechanism, right? Like there are lots of things that are linked, and of course those two things are linked. I mean, when you want to kind of talk about like confounding variables, things like poverty relate to both IQ and relate to criminality. There are many ways that we can see those two things as linked. But the question is there a biological hereditary mechanism for IQ that delineates itself or is distributed in the human population on the basis of race? And it's like, that's just not true. And there is not even a proposed mechanism, not even a mechanism in animals, not even a mechanism in animals that have much more clearly delineated species compared to humans, which are a pretty remarkably invariant species. We're like very, very not variant. Emperor penguins are 4 times more variant than humans, and emperor penguins all look literally identical to me. And so, there are definitely things that there are definitely bad arguments they make.
All right. Yeah, because like the argument I often hear from them is that like 50% of IQ is inherited,
Yeah, but I mean,
and some even go to
inherited
like
is
80%.
Yeah, I mean, inherited's one of those words that people really throw around without understanding what it means. Like, the 99% of all citizenship is inherited. You know what I mean? Like, it is overwhelmingly likely, especially if you're American, 100% of your citizenship is inherited, right? Like, it's something you get from your parents. Most people don't go out and get their own citizenship in other countries. Language, right? Like, speaking the language your parents did is inherited. All of those things are absolutely inherited. Does that mean that they are biological? Like, does that mean that the mechanism of heredity is biological? Not particularly, right? Like, whether or not you speak Cantonese is heritable, extremely heritable, a very high coefficient of heritability, but that doesn't really make it genetic.
Okay then. Another argument I often hear from race realists is that they often said, let's see, sorry, just I received a notification. Um, Even when like certain people are raised in certain environments because of their race, they still have the same criminality and stuff like that. So they often, point out that like, I think it's like blacks or African Americans raised in like high income households still have like really high criminal activity, stuff like that. So what's your response to stuff like that?
I mean, as they do, they like to tell half of the story when it comes to data. So while it is absolutely true that there are higher levels of like arrests and convictions in black populations than white populations, like say in America, what we also know is, for example, Black people are 4 times more likely to get arrested for a drug offense, but they are only as likely as white people to be users. And so a statistic like how many arrests are made or how many convictions are made, which is what they lean on for those things, doesn't really reflect criminality in the way that they want it to, which is like a propensity for an individual to engage in criminal behavior. And I think that's before you get to the like the law itself is quite literally a human construction, right? Like it's rules that we write, and also things that we write and that we decide as people are things like precinct locations. And so in kind of the from the 80s forward, you saw this expansion in very localized police placements where precincts were using different kinds of data and different computer systems to monitor criminality and started making the decisions to place police precincts in high minority areas. And then lo and behold, minorities get arrested more so.
Right.
And so, there's like a lot of political decision making that happens behind the scenes that is very easy to cover up by just saying, like, no, but it's heritable. There's a high heritability coefficient, ergo it must also be genetic and biological. And I don't know, it's the most lazy form of statistical analysis, frankly. And I don't know, to me, I think that's why it's enjoyable, I guess, to debate as much as any topic ever can be. It's really stressful in reality, but yeah, it's just not compelling once you dig into the data.
Okay then. And let's see what else I was gonna say. Um, this is a really interesting argument I once heard. So, as you know, a lot of people like to point out that Africa um, has like high amounts of genetic, how do you say, variability, right? There's a lot of variety in terms of genes and stuff like that. So like one argument I heard is that colors also have a lot of diversity, a lot of variability. Like there's different shades of red, different shades of orange, different shades of blue. So I once heard someone say that if you deny race, you're in a way also denying the color spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, that's goofy, right? Like, in what two ways are those similar, I suppose? I think that the one way, so the first one being that the color itself is, interestingly enough, like a very, very variable thing. And it's not just in terms of, there are different shades of red, but it's like depending on whether or not you're talking about color in terms of physical pigmentation or whether or not you're talking about color as light waves, different colors combine to produce different things. So, like for example, your printer cartridge runs on a different set of colors than lighting requires because producing colors via print is actually requires different combinations of colors than producing colors via light. Right. So, like at a basic level, yellow and green do not make the same color literally, like in terms of how it would be perceived by your eyes. Yellow and green do not make the same color depending on what medium of color we're talking about, and kind of like what what material manifestation that has. But the other thing too is like color is also highly linguistically dependent. So depending on the language you are raised at, you perceive color differently because how we categorize, we receive way more information from our environment than we can possibly process. And so our brain is always making decisions about what is important to highlight and what is not. And so depending on what language you are taught and the language, like how that language categorizes color, if it is different than another language, you actually perceive and see color differently because your brain is trained through language to identify certain things as more important and identify certain differentiations as important. So that's just interesting things about color. But when it comes to humans, I think that the closest thing that you could say to isn't that like denying color. Like that, I'm trying to kind of stretch my brain and find some grains of truth in that argument. And I suppose one thing you could take out of it is that humans do exist on kind of this not a spectrum, right? But like an interesting set of assemblages. Wherein for like any geographic location, you kind of get an interesting what we call clines, right? So like ways that genes are distributed across the world, sort of being in this gradient. And if you imagine like taking the world and taking a piece of saran wrap and like wrapping it around this globe many, many times, in no one location would the saran wrap be identical. It folds, it crinkles in different ways depending on where you are. You have all of these
Right.
gradients as you go across this sheet of saran wrap. And so I suppose the one thing you could say is, at any one moment, isn't there something unique happening? And I think absolutely. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about human diversity and why our species has been effective in not succumbing to pathogens for so long when other species have not.
Okay then. Uh, So like, let's see. I know that also, besides using like race realism as an argument for ethnostates, a lot of people also like to say that like ethnostates or ethnically homogenous communities tend to be more cohesive. They tend to sort of do better in sort of people getting along, that sort of stuff. They might point out that like maybe some of the Scandinavian countries do so well because of how homogenous they are, and that other countries with diversity like United States have all these issues. How do you respond to like those type of claims?
And so when you have a situation in which, people are looking for explanations for why things that are going wrong, there has always been a theorization that has emerged that has blamed a particular kind of person. And out of those blames often comes, comes recognition of diversity that was not previously recognized. And so I don't know. I think there is not a case in human history where diversity has been the cause of conflict, but there are many, many instances in which kind of like creating diversity has been the product of something like slavery is a good example, right? Where you have an economic arrangement that requires a recognition of diversity to sustain itself without the kind of like Virginia slave codes, right? And the codification of racial difference, then you can't really sustain the system of chattel slavery. And so you get a system that is already very unequal and disproportionate, then generating legal codification of race out of those things. And so, it's easy to say, look, these two things exist at the same time and place, that there is both diversity and chaos, ergo, one must cause each other. But I think that has the order of causality backwards. And also, it's just defied by so many communities, like you mentioned before. Sub-Saharan Africa contains 95% of all of human genetic variants, just in that small area alone. And yet we do not see like chaos at the level that we see in Europe, which is allegedly the same race and in some ways homogenous through the 14th and 15th centuries. We see far more chaos within groups of alleged racial homogeneity than we do between groups that are supposed to be, or that are in reality, much more genetically diverse.
Okay then. And is there ever have you ever heard like an argument from like the anti race realist side that you thought was very poor, or people from like your side often used but isn't really all that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that is not helpful is to say, there is no such thing as evolutionary adaptation. I think that some people really try to play down the reality of when you take a human, right? Like there is not a base human. There is only a wide range of genes that we all have that adapts to our environment over time. And if you were to take people that are in any one location and you were to migrate them to another climate, and you gave them, whatever period of time to adapt to their environment, they would look like the people who are indigenous to the, in a more recent and modern sense, indigenous to that part of the world. And so denying the adaptability of humans, I think, is a mistake. But understanding that adaptability comes from a common shared set of genes, and it's just a question of how long have you had to adapt to the environment that you live in. I think that is a much not even just more persuasive, but far more genetically accurate way to understand human genetic diversity broadly.
Okay then. And that going back to like the debate with JF, was there like any part of the debate where you felt that like maybe you could have formed your argument better, or you thought maybe you weren't prepared for a certain part?
Well, I never feel like I'm prepared, and I always feel like I should do absolutely everything different.
Hmm. Okay.
I think I think eternally insecure is the thing. But I mean, if there was one thing in particular, I think I would do differently. I don't know. Maybe maybe just be a little. Well, actually, I do know what it would be. At the very beginning, see, this was one of the first times it happened, and so I wasn't ready for it. But at the very, very beginning, JF did the classic thing, which is invite CV on to talk about something and then drill CV about being transgender. And I would have had a better way to handle that, I think, if I knew it was coming. And I do regret that if I could think back on
Okay then. And I noticed that like on Twitter, you tend to like have, um, and I do the same thing too. Uh, we make the mistake of like following Stefan Molyneux, and like every tweet,
it.
yeah, every tweet there's always like something so like horribly wrong. Like so yeah, Stefan Molyneux has been doing this whole race realism thing for like over a decade now. And I think I would even go further to say that he doesn't just promote like racialism, but he also promotes basically phrenology. And he's one of these weird folk where like he claims he's not an ethno nationalist. He claims he's not a white nationalist. But like his arguments go so close to like supporting their side. And then he always goes with the whole as a defense, well, I'm a libertarian, I'm for like freedom of association. If you had a chance to debate Stefan Molyneux, would you do it?
Oh yeah, I've challenged him to a debate, and he told me that I didn't have enough YouTube subscribers, whatever that means. I don't know why like a career in bacterial genetics, a master's, and a PhD apparently does not qualify me to debate Stefan Molyneux. The only thing that will qualify me to debate Stefan Molyneux is having sufficient numbers of YouTube subscribers. That seems like a very bad way for the public to litigate expertise. But that is the way that he does it. I mean, I think because he knows that he has no idea what he's talking about, and he has to create a standard that looks like he is willing to hit at people on his level, but he's not. He's just not.
Yeah, because Stefan Molyneux is like one of those people that like they have a really like what's the word? They put themselves like in this like really like high intellectual area so much like he even wrote a book about making arguments, stuff like that. Like I think it was called The Art of the Argument. I don't know if you ever read it.
Yeah. I haven't. I didn't know about it until, so I posted something about when I found out. I was like, why did nobody tell me that Stefan Molyneux wrote a book on argumentation? Right? Like, why would you not tell the debate coach this? And then 20 other debate coaches came out of the woodwork and were just like, worst thing in just like had screenshots at the ready. I mean, this was be a thing that made its way around the professional debate community at some point. Had, screenshots of paragraphs and annotations. And so we all had a very good, enjoyable laugh about it, but I have not read it myself. I would like to, but I just can't talk myself into prioritizing it over all of the other things that I really would like to read.
Yeah, no, I understand. Like people have lives, people have work or school. Um,
Yeah, have you read it yourself?
no, I haven't read it myself. From what I hear, it's really bad. I mean, it's well written. Like he has a good understanding of the English language. There isn't any like grammar errors or anything like that. But who knows? Maybe one day I might just get bored. I might read like a see if I can find a page of it online, just to see how it is. But as of now, I don't really plan to read it or anything like that. Oh, did you ever see the clip where he says that where he's talking about like his trip to Poland, and he's having this really weird moment where he claims that he's always spoken against white nationalism, but then he says, I'm an empiricist, and he's having this like really strange, like almost, I don't know, obsession with the fact that like Poland is like mostly white and stuff like that. What's your thoughts on that? If you ever saw that clip.
I haven't seen it, but it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I don't know. I don't envy being in Molyneux's brain. Like all of his followers know what's up. Everyone else knows what's up. Everyone knows he's a white nationalist except for him, apparently. And I just don't. And I think that the way that he dodges it is, the cognitive dissonance because he thinks that maybe white nationalists aren't good people. But so he can't really admit to himself that this is what he believes because he's got this like a moral compass somewhere left in there apparently that is hinting if perhaps he is doing all of the wrong things. But I think he justifies it to himself with all of the science, right? And I think that is the most powerful way that race science is weaponized misinformation is by convincing people like Stefan Molyneux that they're just making these objective determinations about the way that the world ought to work and that it's not him, this is just nature, and nature is a fickle mistress, and so he can't possibly be blamed. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me to hear that he said that. That does seem his style.
Okay. Let's see what else is there. Um, So let's talk about your YouTube channel. I think you've made some great videos on, debunking the whole race realism thing. You made a video on population genetics, IQ, what the right gets wrong about biology. Are you ever planning to maybe expand to like other topics, whether it be politics or science?
I mean, I would love to. I don't know. I mean, I guess I never really considered that anyone like wanted me to make more videos. But also, I don't know. I have no idea what I would say. So I think that if enough people nudged me, I probably would. But I haven't yet had any plans to.
Okay. Cause like I think you could probably maybe make some videos on sex and gender, cause you seem to have a lot you could say about that. And of course, there's this whole debate online about, the whole binary thing. Whether or not sex is, or I should say, gender is, just how do you say, directly related to sex. That it's interchangeable. Um, you know, what's your thoughts on that whole topic?
Well, I mean, it's a competing definitions question. You know, there are so many people who are caught up in this. You know, are there only two genders or are there more? Which is really a ridiculous question because it's just, you know, do you define people predominantly based on the whether they produce sperm or egg, and then you just like cast aside all of the people who produce neither? Which I don't think people realize how many people are born infertile. It's far more than people think, and it's far more than the number of people who are, you know, aware of it or who are intersex or any of those things. I mean, I feel like everyone probably has at least one infertile family member. You know, so it's a question of, do we define our gender, which is not even our sex, right, but our roles in society, the way that we kind of like perform, express ourselves in society related to those roles and kinds of labor, and whether or not they happen in the domestic sphere, right, or in the public sphere. Do we define all of those things on the basis of whether we produce sperm and egg, or do we like allow people for a more, I don't know, variable and rich and nuanced way of articulating themselves by, you know, allowing people to self-identify, by allowing people to identify through their expression, whatever it is. There are many different definitions for transgender, transsexual, all of these different words. And so to me, it's like, could you divide up the population that way? I guess you could. It just doesn't seem very realistic. And also, you know, I feel like the feminists have had something to say about that for several hundred years now. So
Yeah, cause
I don't
like
know. To
some.
me, that kind of stuff is. Go
No,
ahead.
go on.
I was just going to say, to me, that kind of stuff gets boring because it's like, I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm just saying it seems like a very dumb way to organize a society. Like, you have an egg, now you have to cook. You know, like, I don't know. Are we really returning to that? Like, you have sperm, you have to go work in the coal mines. I don't know. It just seems like we could do better.
All right. Yeah, cause like a lot of people say that like gender roles you can, sort of how do I put this? Explain this all the way back to like evolutionary biology. Some people like to cite the study, I think where they had like infants or like really young children play with toys, and like the boys, uh, they ended up going to like the what society perceives as like the boy toys, and the girls ended up going to play on what society perceives as like the girl toys. Have you heard of that study? It's been a while.
Yeah, I have. It's not. Yeah, that's pretty close. So what it found was that for young, we'll just say girls and boys at this point, you know, but for young girls, that they played with the whole range of toys. It didn't really matter. But for boys, they only played with toys that required more mechanical dexterity because, and I mean, this is kind of messed up, right? But like testosterone inhibits your ability to like have finer motor control, and so young boys are kind of drawn to things that help them develop dexterity that they would not otherwise have, and that for girls who have higher natural levels of testosterone, that they were also drawn to those toys because it has to do with the way that kind of like fine motor control and muscular development is inhibited by the presence of testosterone. So people's like great evidence for gender is the fact that like quote unquote biologically males have a harder time figuring out how to move their hands good, and therefore two binary genders is a thing. And I don't know, I guess.
Okay. No, I'm just saying that, like, since you like have your own views, like I would be interested in seeing a video like that. If you don't have to make it, if you don't have time, I
No, I
understand.
mean,
But yeah,
I will definitely think about that. I think it would be fun to do.
yeah,
Just have to get over my fear of being on camera
yeah,
for long enough to sit down and record it.
right. And from what I understand, you're a molecular biologist.
Yeah, so now currently back in school, but yes, that was what my undergrad was in. And I worked in a bacterial engineering lab for a bit. And then debate is my first love, so I went back to get my master's and my PhD in econ, so I can coach debate in college. Because I don't know, I love coaching college kids. It's so much fun. Young scholars are where it's at. Uh, yeah.
Okay, and I'm not sure. Do you have a PhD in biology, or are you a candidate for a PhD?
No, so my PhD, I'm a PhD candidate, but it will be in communication. So I
Oh,
study
okay.
public perceptions of genetics now. I am no longer in the active practice of genetics research, at least
Okay.
not as people usually mean that.
Okay. I hope this question isn't too personal, but like, how do you see yourself in 10 years?
I was going to say something grim, but I'm going to try and pick something a little bit more optimistic.
Okay.
Uh, I don't know. I mean, with any luck, just like teaching, I would really love to. I don't know. I would really love to have a nice job coaching college debate in the academic year, and then continuing to coach high school debate or to teach at summer debate institutes for high school students in the summer. Really like getting to kind of get the range of ages, getting to teach people at a bunch of different stages in their like political identity formation is really gratifying for me. So I hope a stable job doing those two things that I love, and I don't know, maybe having made more than 3 YouTube videos.
All right. Cool. I remember. I'm sure we're all aware of the sort of genre of YouTube of the whole SJW cringe compilation. I remember that
Oh
like
yeah.
there's a video. I think like you're in like one of those videos. It's like something like crazy communist talks about. I don't know something. I forgot what it was. I think I think you know the one I'm referring to.
Oh yeah, do I? So our beloved local right wing person who comes and records everything and puts his camera in people's faces and then is stunned when they tell him to fuck off. But yeah, so he came to a school board meeting and I was testifying at the school board meeting about a contract to renew. It was a to renew police contract for having school resource officers in 4 of our Madison high schools. And I gave a testimony against the contract, and it's very dry. I mean, I would happily link to anyone, but I promise you, it's maybe the most boring 3 minutes of your life. It's very like, here are 10 studies, and here's what they found about the presence of school resource officers at schools and whether or not it enhances or harms student safety. It's very, very dry. And so he posted it on his site anyway, because I don't know, he likes to follow me around and film me. It's honestly the worst. But anyway, so I posted up there and it's like, hashtag SJW, hashtag communist, hashtag, cringe, like crazy Marxist at school board hates cops or whatever. And then I think the funniest part about it is like his followers, because I didn't post it anywhere. I didn't know about it for like 6 months. And then when someone finally told me about it, I'm reading the comments, and the comments are just like, "What are you talking about? This is like a very reasoned, thoroughly evidenced speech."
Right.
And like this other comment was like, "How is this person deranged? Like, what is wrong with you?" And so all the comments were just like, "I don't know. This seems fine." Uh, so hashtag cringe, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, people are pretty desperate for content nowadays, and people are trying to like ride this anti-SJW wave, uh, for not for some time now. It's somewhat dying. I mean, it's still there, but like it's somewhat dying now. Because I noticed like there's now this like bread tuber new left kind of rising on YouTube. So it'd be really interesting. Maybe we'll see the opposite now. Maybe we're gonna see conservative or anti-SJW cringe compilation. That's gonna be really fun. Um,
I feel like we won't get there because I thought a lot about like why doesn't the left really have this, and it's just like I don't know, we don't derive emotional satisfaction from seeing people in humiliating circumstances in the way that the right does. Like the right really feeds off of if the left feeds off of outrage bait, the right really feeds off of humiliation bait and seeing other people suffer. And I don't know very many leftists who feel that way who would watch videos like that because I think it's just uncomfortable.
right, right. I know that you do obviously consider yourself on the left. I understand if you don't like labels, but some people and do call you like a socialist or a communist. Like, what do you think of that? Do you think it's accurate or?
I mean, if you were to force me to identify as something intelligible and not some bullshit that I came up with for myself just to be a pain in the ass, you could probably pin me down as a anarchist socialist, and I would be very comfortable with that.
Okay, so generally speaking, I guess you're not a fan of like hierarchies, whether it be, private sector or the public sector. Um,
Yeah, I think economies that are accountable to communities are good. I think anti-representative democracy is good, and generally, I'm suspicious of the consolidation of power in state hierarchies. So I think that's probably the core belief system.
okay. Let's see what else is there. If anyone's watching the stream, you're more than welcome to ask any questions. I think you already answered this before, but I'll ask you this again. What do you think of like the YouTuber alternative hypothesis? Alt hype.
I mean, you gotta give a man credit for a grift that stays. You know, that grift has staying power. There are so many articles on that website that you read and you're just like, you can't quite find the words to express how frustrating it is. But I mean, you got to give a guy credit. He's taken correlational studies and really managed to turn them into, I think, playing on people's deep desire to believe that their own racism is in fact not a thing that they have to really be introspective about and work on, and to understand that it comes from a deeply poisoned society, and then you have to deal with all of that, and much less your own place in the hierarchy. I think people would much prefer to believe that their racism is just something natural and something that they should feel, and something that's not only correct but kind of morally important for us to acknowledge. It's much easier to believe that. And so, to his credit, he's found a strong audience of people seeking confirmation bias and has turned that into, what, 9, 10 years now of sustainable grifting. So good for him.
Right, right. Sorry, it's just like I'm having some issues here. Cause like apparently the stream kind of like froze on like your webcam, so it's like I don't see any video on the stream. Like I see you just fine in the Google Hangouts, but like for some reason on the stream it's kind of frozen. I'm trying to see if I can fix that. So give me a sec.
Yeah, go ahead. If we turn the like video off, does that help at all?
Give me a sec. Oh boy. Mm. Sorry. Give me a sec. Do this again. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Technical difficulties. Just give me a sec. If you'd like to clarify anything, you know, now's the time.
Oh, geez. I mean, not anything I can think of. If people have specific questions, I'm definitely happy to answer them, but no specific clarifications. I don't know. I have been blessed with, for the most part, very good podcast experiences where mostly I've been treated fairly and been able to kind of get out my ideas and share them with people, and get good feedback and refine them accordingly, because they're not always particularly good ideas. So I'm very grateful for the feedback that I get. So no, I mean, I think I get to live in maybe more clarity than the average online person, which is truly a blessing.
Okay. Okay, I think that's a lot better now. Yeah, if you could just maybe just stick to like the profile picture, I think that would be better because it's less
That's
lag that
perfect.
way. Yeah, sorry, it's just the internet isn't the best, so
No, you're totally good.
yeah, we have to stick to this for now. So let's see. Is there anyone you would like to debate besides, Stefan Molyneux or Charles Murray?
Well, Charles Murray did agree to debate me,
Oh,
but he
really?
said he would only, he did, but then he said in the emails that if we do a debate that has anything to do with race, that it's too dangerous and he won't come. So he wouldn't let me debate about any topic that involved race, at which point I no longer became interested in debating Charles Murray, because what am I going to debate Charles Murray about that has nothing to do with race, right? Like,
Right, right.
come on, this is the core of the contention, about your work. And so I'm not really gonna. It was like, oh well, we could have a debate about whether or not phylogenetic scores are useful for the future. I'm like, nobody cares about that, Thomas, right? Like, you're not a
Right.
geneticist, so I don't really care about your opinion about that, and frankly, nobody else cares either. So that didn't happen. But other people I would like to debate. Oh yeah, I mean Ben Shapiro. If I could wipe the floor with Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk just once, do it for the people. Do it for the culture. That's the dream.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Ben Shapiro, Charles, what was it, Charlie Kirk, the guy of the Turning Point USA thing. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
yeah. I know like they like to think highly of themselves, is seeing like these people that like can wreck the left and like can just own anyone on debate. So it'd be really cool if they stop, just like if they stop, how do you say, going for low hanging fruit and maybe debate someone that's a little bit more, uh,
But they never will. They're
yeah.
performance artists. Like Shapiro was cultivated. He's not a he's Ben Shapiro is not a person as much as he is a production. You know what I mean? I don't mean that in a demeaning way. I mean that in the sense that, like, in the same way that you know any like Hannah Gadsby is not a person as much as a performance, right? Like in the Netflix special that she like. I mean, in the sense that, like, media events are media events, and it's less. So Ben Shapiro is not someone who has any idea what he's talking about. I think that is abundantly evident. He has a team of people that helps him write his tweets, and he still tweets some of the dumbest shit you've ever seen. And so, I think that would be awesome.
Well, the way I see it, I mean, Ben Shapiro, like, there's nothing really special about him when you really think about it. Just like, what's special about it was his appeal to, like, the sort of young generation, sort of my generation. He's basically, how do I put this, Rush Limbaugh, but somehow marketable to young people. That's the best way I can explain to him. Because he's really just speaks, it's just neoconservative talking points, in a way that, like, sounds like he's very smart, but he's just, like, talking really fast and, like, citing sources that supposedly support his views. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that it's appealing in two ways. I think the first way it's appealing to people is if you repeat something enough, people will start to believe it is true. And so I think that there is a reason why does anyone, like, stop and wonder where Ben Shapiro gets his money from? Like, he doesn't appear to have a job. Like, I guess he produces a podcast, but, like, as any podcaster will tell you, that's not really revenue in and of itself. And his podcast isn't really good enough, in my opinion, or the analysis is always pretty shaky, to generate the kind of revenue it does. And so it kind of begs the question of, like, where do you get your money, Ben Shapiro? And then the answer is that Ben Shapiro is paid by heavy Republican donors who want to see capitalism sustain itself into the future, who want to see kind of like the status quo, and the expansion of all of the different ways that capitalism has become a surveillance state unto itself. To see all of those things expand. And that's not sustainable, and that's the most ridiculous of all the ideas. But that if you put someone in front of people and they say it enough, and they have the platform to be able to do that, because you can do things like pay Twitter to put your tweets in front of millions and millions of people, and pay Twitter to have a hashtag about you trend. So you do that long enough, and you can get people to believe that what you say is true, just because they've heard it so much, and it doesn't seem like there's any real opposition out there. Which is why he only challenges people who he knows are going to say no. Like, AOC was never going to say yes. We all knew she was not going to say yes. That was a
Right.
very well produced media stunt. So I think that that's part of it. I forget what the other part was. Who knows? There's only one part.
Okay. Yeah, according to Liberal Standing Project, he says a William Institute study comes to mind. Um, he mentions like one of the arguments Ben Shapiro uses, because one of the biggest thing that like Ben Shapiro's known for is for the whole transgender thing, and I don't know how he's done it, but he's managed to make basically bigoted trans views about transgender somehow really cool. in a sense that like he's basically supposedly debunking the LGBT. I don't know. Like, let's see. According to LSP, one of like the arguments he often uses: trans people commit suicide and no amount of support helps. I mean, that's basically a paraphrase of like one of his arguments. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, so the thing that Liberal Sanity Project said in the comments under it is true, which is like there are just so many studies that show that supportive environments do trans people commit less suicide when they're in more supportive environments. I'm not really sure how Ben Shapiro thinks mental illness functions. If he's never been depressed himself, maybe he's not sentient enough to be self-aware to feel things like depression. Certainly not shame. But if you've never been there and you've never experienced mental health, maybe you think it's a sort of thing where suicide is an inevitable slippery slope that some people are on. But that's not what it is. The trans people get bullied and they start to think that there's no hope, and they start to think that nothing will ever be better. And they start to think that they'll never be perceived by the world and even by themselves as the way that they see themselves, that they'll never really truly be able to embody those things, and that you can very quickly convince yourself that there is no future, at least no future that you want to live in. If you believe that set of things. And so, yeah, I'm not, trans suicide rates are high. And the more visible trans people have become and the more legislative backlash that we have encountered as a result of that, yeah, it makes your suicide rate higher. It truly does.
Right, right. Um, yeah, it'd be really interesting if you can debate some of these big things. But like, there are smaller channels there. I mean, would it be fun if like you maybe had a debate or a discussion with Sargon of Akkad? I mean, that's always fun to watch.
All right, look, I will. I say yes to every debate every time. I've never turned down a debate. I don't know much about Sargon. I mean, I watched. I remember one time being in Charlotte's airport and watching him debate Richard Spencer, huddled up in the corner of the like food court area of the Charlotte airport, watching that for a while. That's my only knowledge of Sargon. But yeah, I mean, let's go. Anyone, anytime is generally my feeling.
Okay. Um, well, the right does have an interesting sort of argument against race realism, which is basically that like a lot of the issues in like the black community often comes down to culture rather than biology. So they'll argue that like fatherlessness is like a huge issue in these communities. What do you think about those type of arguments?
I mean, I the fatherless stuff is partially a myth, partially reality. The myth part is how widespread I think people think it is, and how much of that relates to individual decision making. The true part of that is when you incarcerate, for example, here in Wisconsin, 1 out of every 3 black men, then yeah, you're going to end up with high rates of homelessness because the police prey on the black community. And then it's not just men, it's also black women, and increasingly high rates are being incarcerated now as well. We're seeing a big once you expand the prison population as far into men as you possibly can. I guess the next frontier is women, and so we're seeing increased rates of arrests for black women and black girls, and that severely damages a community. Prison breaks people. It breaks them financially, it breaks them spiritually, it makes them more likely to engage in violence because prison itself is a form of violence. And that's how you learn that justice happens through violence. You take that back into a community. It's no different than when people return from war, right? With a certain very traumatic understanding of conflict resolution and of how communities are supposed to function. And in the same way, we saw horrible things happen in post-war, like post-World War One, post-World War II with veteran families. We also see ongoing impacts of anti-Black policies on the Black community.
All right. Yeah, because their argument is that a lot of these problems in these communities, and also they make a similar case for white communities as well, comes from like the welfare state. That the welfare state sort of like keeps people from dying of hunger, but doesn't encourage people to climb out of their social class, their economic class, and it sort of like encourages, I guess, women to have a lot of children, but not to like find work or anything like that. Um, that it, yeah.
I mean, people's priority is survival, right? Like if you take people down to our most base instinct, it is survival. And so, yeah, if you put people in a situation where there's not a lot of hope, and you provide them one avenue through which they can access food and shelter, then they're going to be more likely to work to secure those things. It's a long, horrible bureaucracy, the welfare system. It is one of the most inefficient things you could possibly imagine. And people's entire lives get sucked into trying to gain stability in their lives, trying to gain stable housing, trying to gain stable access to food, and stable schooling for their children. And you can take up the majority of a person's life with the bureaucracy that is the welfare system, and they have very little incentive or ability to kind of like make themselves not dependent on that. And I think that's sort of one of the realities we're facing up against in late stage capitalism and highly automated capitalism with the lack of jobs. That is a lot of what we're seeing. So yeah, I mean, I don't agree with the right wing characterization of it being like people are just lazy and so they just go rely on the government. But it is absolutely true that bureaucracy cultivates a kind of forced dependence that many people get stuck on when they are in poverty.
All right. So CV, are you good for time?
We should probably wrap up fair in the next couple of minutes, but I'm okay. Like it's not super urgent.
Okay, that's fine then. Let's see. Because I think I've asked you like a lot that I wanted to ask you though. What would you say to someone that like wants to like get into the debate game? Like, what would you recommend someone to do to prep for a debate, since you have like experience with this?
I would say that, and it's gonna maybe be an annoying answer, but it's the true one. Like debate people locally, like in person, your friends, your enemies, I don't know, journalists, whoever. But really start to get a feel for what it is to not only have to think and adapt very quickly to situations, but also get a feel for the common flow of an argument, the way that people, the different trajectories that a topic can take, different ways that an argument can develop. The directions it can go are not always the same. And so I would say, really get comfortable with a topic, get comfortable arguing about a topic, and develop a set of like go-to responses before you put yourself in the public eye and, you know, either do some real political damage to your ideology by getting it waxed in front of 10,000 people or, just making yourself really sad.
All right, cool. If there's anything else you'd like to clarify, or if there's anything you'd like to point out, now's the time to do it. Like,
Thank you. No, nothing comes to mind. I mean, I'm super grateful for the time, and I feel like this it's been a long time coming in the years we've known each other. So this is a really great experience.
all right, cool. So, if anyone would like to check out CV's YouTube channel, there will be a description in the stream. I'll also link your your Twitter account as well, because it's always fun to see your responses to Stefan Molyneux. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, so thanks for coming on the stream.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Okay, until then, stay classy.